welcome to the stage. And for those that haven't met me, my name is John Lockley. I'm the executive pastor here at Hamilton Central Baptist Church. Please be seated, and I'll call upon each of you in turn to introduce yourselves, and we'll get straight underway. We've managed to find a seat, managed to find the right seat. Always good. First of all, let's call upon the Honourable Tim McIndoe and the Honourable David Bennett, sitting MPs for Hamilton West and Hamilton East. Just to identify yourselves. Thank you very much. We have Jamie Strange, Labour List MP, and Dr. Gaurav Sharma, Labour MP, Labour Party candidate. Thank you very much. We have Roger Weldon and Maya Diebman from the Axe Party. Welcome. I believe Rimu Boyd cannot be here tonight. She is unwell. She has chosen to do the right thing and to stay home, as we've all been asked to do. So I just ask you to respect that she can't be here tonight, not because she wouldn't want to be here, but simply out of respect for the rest of us, and we appreciate that. I understand that Stu Husband for the New Zealand First Party is also unwell. He's actually been taken into hospital. And we have Russell tonight, who is not a part of the party in terms of its organisation, but part of the party faithful. At last minute, she has agreed to simply sit in. As questions go through, if she doesn't feel she has the authority to answer them, she will simply pass. If she feels that she can, she will, to help inform us. And I'd ask you again to respect that. We've got someone standing in at the last minute. Thank you for that. We have Rudy DeCoy and Julie Manders from the New Conservative Party. Welcome to the stage. Hayden Cargo and Dr. Naomi Pocock from the Opportunities Party. Thank you very much and welcome to the stage. And I believe Donna Pukeri Phillip from the Māori Party cannot be here tonight. She is actually tied up in a family tangi, so we respect that and her commitment to family. So we have these candidates on stage. They're not all of the parties that are represented in the next election, but we had a cut-off of around 1% polling as we made decisions, and these are the people that have made the cut in terms of what we could organise. So I'll ask you to give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. We're going to take opening statements. Now, the statements are per political party. Okay? So political parties with more than one representative, you need to decide who will give your opening statement. The statements, you'll have 2 minutes to do your pitch. Alright? On the board ahead of you up here, and probably somewhere else, we'll have that 2-minute warning to come up for you. And then the music will start at around 1:50. Right. Now, to be absolutely fair, I'm going to draw things out of the hat, okay? And I did manage to find the hat. Here we go. The Opportunities Party. You have 2 minutes to pitch your position. From there, take up the microphone and away you go.
Hello. Kia ora te whānau. I'm Naomi Pocock, representing the Opportunities Party, and tonight please bear with me while I talk to you about policy, because the Opportunities Party has the policy that gives me hope for our future. We have looked around the world and seen what's working well and applied that to the New Zealand context to create some really in-depth policy to drive New Zealand forward. As you saw before with the cows, I consider us to be the party of common sense. And so what I want to do tonight is just brief you a little bit about policy and how we differentiate from the others. Our policies are socially and environmentally responsible and fiscally sound. Now, I've spent the last couple of weeks listening to some of these people. They're really friendly and nice people, but unfortunately they represent parties whose policies are non-existent at best and downright shocking at worst. Let me tell you about that for a moment. So, we're going to spend a lot of money, people, in the next few years, our children's money and our grandchildren's money, and Tom wants to make sure that that is spent well. So I'm going to run through a few of these parties' policies. New Zealand First has 0 policies on their website. They have a document which is a series of bullet points under a series of headings. For us, that is not policy. The Greens Party has policy that is going to drive wealth off seas, disincentivise investment in the green economy, and widen the welfare trap for our beneficiaries. The ACT Party has policy that could drive us to deflation while throwing a whole lot more people off the cliff. And National and Labour have policy that tinkers at the edges based on a 3-year election cycle. Okay, it's not visionary, it's not leadership, and it's not what we need to spend this money wisely for the next little while. The Opportunities Party, on the other hand, is that time?
That's up. Up on the clock.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. That's the 2 minutes. Right, second up. Here's ACT.
So, good evening everyone. First of all, just a big thank you to Brian and all the other organisers of tonight's event. Also a huge thank you to all of yourselves, especially taking a Sunday evening out to come listen to us. So, I'm Roger Bolden, I'm the ACT candidate for Hamilton West, and sitting next to me is Maya Deedman from Hamilton East. You know, ACT represents the interests of hard-working Kiwi taxpayers and consumers. You know, we're a party of independent thinkers. We're a party of people that believe in common sense and real solutions to the problems that New Zealand face. We're certainly not a party of empty rhetoric, and we're certainly not a party of virtue signaling. Now, when you look at our top 8 list, what you're not going to see is a list of career politicians. What you are going to see is a list of engineers, you're going to see farmers, you're going to see teachers, small business owners, and volunteers. You know, we're one of the most diverse group of people, you know, whether it be gender, whether it be ethnic background, but one thing that unites us is a belief that, you know, we want to see a freer New Zealand. We want to see a New Zealand that is more prosperous than what it is at the moment. You know, we all know that New Zealand is facing something that we have not faced before, and we're going to need to change. We simply cannot afford the ongoing poor quality thinking, the poor quality spending, and the lack of accountability that we continue to see in the Red duopoly. You know, ACT has a plan to jumpstart our recovery by fast-tracking support through to our small businesses and through to our farmers. You know, we all know that part of that community is going to be absolutely essential for our recovery. And ACT will absolutely continue to stand up for our freedoms, whether it be freedom of choice, freedom of speech. Ultimately, we want to see less government in people's lives, with government doing a little bit less, but a little bit better.
Thank you so much. Well done. Our third party this evening is National.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, good evening, and could I echo Roger's words of thanks both to Brian, to you, John, to Stephen, to Liz, who I know plays such an important part in the ministry here, and to all of you for getting up your evening. This was the best organised and the best attended candidates meeting in 2017, and I think you're going to retain that record tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this has sometimes been described as a COVID election. It is not. There is no such thing. And you should not be deceived by that into turning away from the very important issues that we all must focus on. Because the challenge we face as a nation over the next generation is greater than any we've had since the Great Depression and perhaps even before that. The National Party has a very proud track record, as we demonstrated during the global financial crisis, which was considerably compounded by the Canterbury earthquakes and the huge economic impact of that, of managing our way through a crisis. We came through that, brought our country back into surplus faster than almost any other country in the world, and were held up by the OECD as the finest example of how to do it without resorting to an austerity package. We therefore have the confidence that we can do that again. Here in Hamilton, 3 years ago, a number of important projects that David Bennett, my friend and colleague, the MP for Hamilton East, and I and our other colleagues were putting forward to you, including further extensions to the Waikato Expressway, the Waikato Medical School, and some other important things, were really important Unfortunately, they've all been either ignored or mothballed by the current government. The one significant pledge they made to you of a commuter train from Auckland to Hamilton still hasn't materialised, and here we are at a point where we need to create opportunities for our young people in particular, but for those who have lost their jobs, for those whose businesses have gone to the wall, to be able to invest in ways that will help create real economic recovery. The National Party is the party to do that.
Thank you very much. The next party, New Zealand First.
Thank you. Just bear with me for a moment. As was explained, I'm not a candidate, but we are facing the worst recession in my lifetime. A lurch to the ultra-left, or the neoliberalism at ACT, will cripple this country for years to come. A party vote for New Zealand First and the common sense of that party is my insurance. Someone much wiser than me once said, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And frankly, I'm terrified that we might be going to do just that. New Zealand First was born out of the inequity of a tax that taxed mum and dad's savings at 80%. Yes, 80% when they got the universal superannuation. It was started by Labour, and National went to the polls promising to remove it. It didn't, and New Zealand First was born out of that, and it kept its promise. The Greens want to reintroduce that tax under the guise of a wealth tax. A tax on the investment and savings of hard-working Kiwis. It's in effect a death duty, because if you aren't rich enough to have the liquidity to pay for it, they claim they will simply take it off your estate. That makes you feel better, doesn't it, I'm sure. On the other hand, we have ACT wanting to bring back the failed and discredited Rogernomics that threw thousands of good Kiwis onto the scrap heap of unemployment. And good people suicided like dead lemmings when they couldn't get mortgage payments on the homes and businesses and their farms. Austerity doesn't work. The choice for me is simple. It's immaterial to me personally whether it's Labour or National who form the government. So long as we have the common sense and the outstanding New Zealand First Ministers we've had for the last 3 years, anyway.
When we said we'd keep you to time, we said we'd keep you to time. Just to let you know that the questions are coming through, I'm seeing them here. Can I just remind people, if you want to ask a question, it's going to be to all the candidates. Don't send through a question for one particular candidate or one particular party. They'll go to all of the people on, all of the parties on stage. Just thinking ahead for that. Our next speaker or party is the New Conservative Party.
Hello, my name is Julie Manders, Hamilton born and bred, candidate for New Conservative for Hamilton East. In my career, I've utilised my skills and instincts to ensure value for money, something our politicians don't seem to understand. Then I made the leap to business owner in 2004. I understand the dynamics and challenges of being in business, something career politicians don't seem to relate to. The role of government is to represent and serve the people. Too many politicians have forgotten that, even to respect the taxpayer. I have stepped up and got involved because I'm concerned at the direction in which our country is heading. Is the writing on the wall? And what does it say about our future? I believe New Conservative have the people and the policies to make a positive difference. A party full of practical people with real-world experience who value life and humanity, with common sense ideas to the issues that face New Zealand. At this moment in time, if you believe in democracy and the power of the people, if people stand up and speak out and make a powerful statement with their vote, With this year's election, we have an opportunity to bring fresh ideas, real democracy, and hope for the future. Being conservative can feel like being thrown to the lions for standing up for what you believe. I happen to believe that most of us are going to face some major issues that we have to stand up for. What do you stand for? In an age where so many seem to be bowing down and giving in and being silenced, stand up for truth and not bend under cultural pressure. Stand up with faith, with courage and strength, like standing and representing with dignity, with integrity, with courage and with conviction. I can do that, we can do that, if not us, who? And I pledge to you, I will.
Labour.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Brian, John. Big thank you to all the candidates for being here tonight, and thank you very much to all of you for coming out on Sunday night to listen to us. My name's Jamie Strange. I've been the Labour Party List MP in Hamilton for the past 3 years. Before that, I was a school teacher and a church minister. My wife and I have got 4 lovely children. Hamilton is coming of age as a city. Our time has come. It's a wonderful place to live, work, own a business, and raise a family. Some of the key things that this government have achieved over the past 3 years is the passenger rail to Auckland, that I acknowledge we're not, we're still a couple of months away. It's due to start early next year. The carriages are here, they've already been blessed. The Waikato Regional Theatre, we're about to turn the sod on that soon. The government's contributed towards that. Hamilton is hosting the headquarters of the nationwide Polytech merger. So as many of you know, the Polytechs were merged. It was a contestable process. Hamilton beat out Christchurch, Palmerston North and other cities to host that. This government have invested $300 million in the Peacocks housing development and the bridge and the road that connects to that, the Ruakura development. Hamilton Christian School integration, something I've personally been very proud of. And obviously our COVID response. I'm going to pass over to Gurel Sharma for the last 50 seconds.
Kia ora. Kia ora everyone, my name is Gaurav Sharma. I am the Labour candidate from Hamilton West. So I work as a doctor at Avalon Medical Centre in Norton, and I live in Frankton. Look, what James said is a lot about the local stuff that he's been advocating for and he's achieved. On a larger level, if you look at it, these are unprecedented times, and we've got a leader at the moment who's revered around the world, who's done a great job, because she's taken the best public health advice there is and acted on it. And that's what we need at the moment. People who listen to the science, listen to the facts, and act on it. Whether it's after a volcano, whether it's after a Christchurch attack, whether it's after a COVID response. So that's the sort of people we need. And on a local level, it's good to have a doctor and somebody who's in education represent you on a local level and part of the government.
And let's take that round of applause for the whole team, please. We're now going to move to the part of the evening which is really up to you. There is the QR code, you can send in your questions. We're going to take those questions that come through. We've also had some other questions presented before tonight, so we're going to now present those in a random order. Again, it's going to be answered by party, so you can have a quick conflict as to who wants to answer each question, and I'll call on each party sequentially in a random order to reflect on the question. Those that go first, of course, don't have as much time to think about it. Those at the end get a lot more time to think. This time you've only got 1 minute, 60 seconds to reflect on the question. Here's the first question. The biggest issue of 2020 so far has been the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, and as a nation we've had to borrow a lot of money to help keep our economy afloat. What are your strategies from your party's perspective for rebuilding our economy, and what are your predictions for how long it will take to get the books back in the black? Alright, all clear? Let's start with the New Conservatives.
Right, that's an easy one to answer, obviously. The The fact of the matter is, I think the way that we dealt with COVID was done in a time that there was very little information about COVID. But we cannot engage in a situation where we go into lockdown every time there's 4 cases of COVID. That's just the reality. So we have to base everything that we do, we have to base it on the science. And the science evolves all the time. So how do we get the economy to actually grow? And that is, we've got to put money back in the pockets of the people. You can decide what is the best. Would you trust government to have the money? Or would you actually prefer to have the money in your pocket and you decide how to spend it? We need to get our young labourers out there working. We need to get structured. This is not easy. But training is essential, and contracts are essential.
Thank you very much, New Conservatives. The second, yeah, give them a hand, it's not easy. The second group is New Zealand First. I said random.
Am I? Oh, yes, it is, I'm sorry. You have to understand I'm not a seasoned politician. I'm used to this kind of thing. Winston Peters has always said that not all debt is bad debt. And so long as we use it to improve infrastructure, and we use it to create industry and create jobs, debt is worthwhile taking on. In Northland, for instance, the forest's all foreign owned. And we send our logs offshore. So we effectively export jobs. The logs go offshore, where they're processed offshore, and then they're sent back to us as logs, and then we pay through the nose for it. Now that doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't make sense to New Zealand First either, I don't think. So as long as we can create industry that will create work for our people, we'll weather this. But if we waste it on unproductive things, we'll be in deep doo-doo for years and years to come, I think. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. The next party to hear from is the Labour Party.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. Look, I agree with Winston Peters around the debt. Not all debt is bad debt. Look, our government has borrowed $60 billion to shield us from the COVID challenges. We've kept back $14 billion in reserve, which we won't spend if we don't have to. I know that the National Party want to spend half of that on some projects, but that's up to them. But look, so we are keeping a little bit back. Now, our debt to GDP, when we compare it to other countries, is still relatively comfortable. It's up in that high 40s level. Leading into COVID, it was around 20%, so it has bumped up a little bit. So I believe it's around 48%. When you look at the US, they're up around 100%. The UK are up around 70 to 80%. Australia are up around 70%. Japan are 210% of net debt to GDP. We will start paying that back, and there are other things, but I'll get on to them later in the debate.
Thank you so much. Following the Labour position, we'll take the National position.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Brian and John, for organising tonight, and thank you, everyone, for coming along. That's a brilliant question. I think it's the heart of what this election is about. As Labour said, they've spent 40-odd billion. They've got another 100-odd billion that they're going to spend in the next year. And your choice in 2 weeks' time is where that money is spent. And if that money is spent on the social kind of spending and keeping people feeling that there's no issues out there that the Labour Party wants to do, then the result of that is we have to pay that back in higher taxes over time. The other option is the National Party view, and that's where we want to spend a majority of that money on infrastructure so that we create jobs, we get people working, and that then provides the funding for our government debt and the interest on that. And that is the choice you have in 2 weeks' time. It is that simple, whether you want to use that debt constructively, and in the Waikato, for example, that means building roads like the ones from Hamilton to Tauranga. Those kind of things make a big difference to provide jobs and opportunities, and that's how we pay our way out.
Thank you. Let's now hear from the Opportunities Party.
Hello. So the best way to recover, to rebuild our economy is to put the money into the pockets of the people. And the Opportunities Party has some clear policy for that. The universal basic income and sorting out our cost of housing in terms of house prices and rent prices. Putting the money in the pockets of the people, enabling them to spend it in our economy on businesses or to pay down their private debt. That's what's needed. Not putting money into banks, not putting money into rising house prices. We can have affordable housing and we can eradicate poverty. We can even have clean rivers if we just listen to the experts and do what they say we need to do. On all policy areas, not just COVID-19 is where we need to be listening to expertise. Now you'll hear National and Labour bicker over infrastructure projects. We are saying that every single infrastructure project needs to go through a transparent business case that considers economy, environment and society. And TOP will hold both National and Labour to account for the next 30 years to make sure that the wise decisions are made. So let's not leave change to chance. And that's the rest of my speech from earlier as well.
As we round this question out, we'll hear from Matt.
So I'm not going to stand up and knocking the table open and embarrassing. Listen, I think we need to have a real serious look at the debt. Now, within a decade, we're going to be spending more on the interest on the money that we've borrowed than our whole education budget. ACT does have a plan. I'm not going to go through every single point of the plan. I'd really encourage you to go and have a look at our alternate budget. I'd also encourage you to have a look at this. We've got a website called Debt Destroyer, and you can be in charge of where you think the government should be spending its money. I want to touch on just two things of our alternate budget though. So first off, it's about balancing the books. We're one of the only parties, if not the only party, that actually gets us into surplus by 2024. And that's by cutting $7.6 billion of wasteful spending. Things like a green school, a private green school. We can't afford things like that at the moment. We'd also look at cutting the middle tax bracket down from 30% down to 17.5%, as well as GST down to 10% for 12 months. Also getting Kiwis back to work by looking at 90-day trials, or reintroducing 90-day trials, and having a 3-year moratorium on minimum wage increases.
Thank you very much. Right, a new question to deal with, so listen carefully. Where does your party stand in terms of immigration backlogs and lack of staff to deal with applicants? Do you have any policies to resolve the issue of what we call Pacific overstayers, who have petitioned the government to look into their situation? For this question, we'll take the Opportunities Party first.
So immigration backlog and Pacific Island overstayers.
Immigration policy and Pacific Islands particularly.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we only just released our new immigration policy this week. Let's see if I've got it in my head. So it's around making sure that our immigration policy is around welcoming people who can improve our standard of living, but not the people who are just going to be a drain on our economy or that we have to provide a whole lot of infrastructure for, which we don't have: schools, healthcare, etc. So, immigration policy hasn't been dealt with well in the past by either of our major parties, and we've got a strong policy to fix that. In terms of the Pacific Island, we acknowledge that we have a debt to the Pacific Island region and that climate change is coming and the islands are sinking. We are going to need to welcome Pacific Island nations into New Zealand and take some responsibility for what they're facing in their future. So that's important to us. They're our cousins in this region. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. The second party we'll hear from this time around is the Labour Party.
Thank you, John. Look, in terms of immigration, I mentioned there's a number of business owners here in the building, and obviously I can't speak for all of you, but I'm sure that most of you would like to employ people who were born in New Zealand, who grew up in New Zealand. The reality is sometimes we don't always have the specific skills in those areas, so hence we generally bring in people from overseas. We are very fortunate that we are a country that people want to come to. so we can effectively pick the people that we want who will add value to our economy. And I'm sure many people in this room have come here on one of those visas. Now, unemployment is projected to rise. I'm not sure that in the Waikato region it will rise as much as it probably will nationally. I think our economy is fairly resilient. But the reality is when unemployment does rise, we tend to not bring in as many migrants from overseas. That's probably the way that it will go, but there'll always be a space for specific skilled migrants. And the Pacific Overstayers will be working with you.
Thank you very much. Next up is the ACT Party.
So ACT is, will continue to be pro-immigration. We don't have a specific policy to deal with, the Pacific region and the question that was framed up. Yeah, but we certainly would look to pursue a free trade and free movement with our counterparts like Australia, Canada, and the UK. Now, the other thing to talk to is it's important that we maintain our values of freedom and property rights and the rule of law. So, there should be some non-negotiable rules of entering the country that we would continue pushing for.
Thank you very much. Next we'll hear from the National Party.
The National Party supports migrants coming to New Zealand, and unlike the current government, we have been open to making sure people make New Zealand their home. And the important situation we've got now is with the border being shut under COVID and how we deal with that. And we have put out a policy of a strong border policy that will enable employers to actually bring people in and to do their quarantine regime and to make sure that those people can make New Zealand their home on a short-term or a long-term basis. And the biggest issue we're facing at the moment is in the RSE scheme. That's the Recognised Seasonal Employment Scheme, and that's basically your fruit pickers and people like that coming in. There's a shortage of people that is going to do those jobs, and it would be nice to think Kiwis would take that work up, but they haven't. And a lot of those people, they all come from the Pacific Islands, and we want to make sure there's a pathway for those people to come in, do the 6 months or 12 months that they will do under that scheme, and then that we can actually enable our businesses and our primary production to deliver.
Next we'll hear from New Zealand First.
Hi. I'm almost tempted to get you to repeat the question for me, but I guess I'll just run along. I guess, as a country, we've had 70,000 net immigrants year on year, and we wonder why we have problems of overcrowding of our schools and our hospitals and our roads. The New Zealand First policy has always been to bring in people that we need, not people who need us. We don't need any more highly qualified taxi drivers, I don't think. We haven't trained apprentices for years and years and years. And we've abandoned our farm cadet scheme. And I think that going forward, we need to be training Kiwis to do the jobs that we're importing people to fill currently. I can't say that that's directly New Zealand First policy, but it's in line with the thinking of the people who support the party and the sorts of things that have been said over the years. So I hope that's it.
And in this round, we'll finish off the New Conservative Party.
One needs to have a very careful look at immigration. Right now, immigration is actually in lockdown. People, even essential skills, that want to come down, even from Australia to come work here. It's impossible for them to get through. They can't leave Australia because they're in lockdown. They can't come here because we're in lockdown. So it's really a very difficult issue. And if I understood the question, it said, how do we deal with the backlog? The backlog means if we can deal with it, and we have to deal with it, we have to go and cancel that lockdown and start bringing in the essential skilled people. It doesn't matter that we talk about it and we don't do anything about it. We've got to release the restrictions that there are on highly skilled people to come into the country. That's the way that we have to deal with immigration. And unfortunately, it looks like there's no political will to actually deal with this issue. But it is a real fundamental thing. I know of diesel companies that cannot get people in to come into the country.
Thank you very much. Well, we come to our third question, and this one is in terms of Te Tiriti of Waitangi. It goes a little like this. How does your party plan to uphold and better honour Te Tiriti of Waitangi? And in your answer, you may wish to reference ihumato and the teaching of Māori language in schools. They come together as one question. First off, the first cab off the rank this time is the Labour Party.
All right. So look, I think the most important thing is that we are involved in Mana Whenua and Tangata Whenua in terms of writing policies. So as far as the Labour Party itself is involved, we have a very robust Maori sector. We've got a Maori vice president, and all our policies come from the grassroots level. So people are involved in writing every policy, every remit that is involved. As far as the two other specific questions are involved, so we are trying to encourage people to teach Maori at school, teach New Zealand history at school, and we're hoping that by 2024, all schools will be teaching New Zealand history as well. As far as ihumato is concerned, we are working with the iwi, we are working with various stakeholders involved. There is no decision yet, but our sort of involvement is making sure all the groups come together and are happy with the final response.
And the second respondent is the ACT Party.
So I'll answer this from two different perspectives. So first off, to do with ihumato and property rights. So ACT is a party that's always going to stand up for individual property rights. So, government intervention is possibly one of the worst things that could have happened. The second thing that I'll talk to is, speaking of Māori in schools, one thing that surprises me is how Labour actually stopped charter schools within the country. There was something that was a glimmer of hope for a lot of students that, that was their only chance to get through the education system. So, in terms of speaking Māori, it's not something that we would make mandatory, but it's certainly something that, from an individual choice and allowing communities the opportunity to have schools to teach whatever language that they want, that's something that we stand for.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the New Conservatives.
Probably one of the most disturbed documents, or has been used as such, to divide New Zealand. The treaty is actually a document that should unite, and if we can forge a way forward, I think that's excellent. I am really excited about cultural issues in terms of Maori. I think there should be more recognition in terms of that. I think Te Reo is something that has to have a good look at. We cannot go ahead with school rollouts and enforce education that is not wanted or not required. I think it's a matter of a negotiation between the parents of the schools, and that's really what we're all about. We're always saying we need to go back to the people. We need to know what the people are saying. We, as politicians, we have no right to ignore the people. So what I'm saying is we listen to the people and we roll out Te Reo wherever it's required.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from New Zealand First.
I don't actually know the New Zealand First policy on Māori language. I think we've probably all heard Winston's views on ihumato, in that it has been settled by the Treaty at Waitangi, and someone has been paid for that land. And I guess the fear is that if you renegotiate it, every settlement that's been conducted under the Treaty of Waitangi can be reopened. I guess that's all I've got to say on that, because I don't really know the policy about it.
Thank you for fronting that. Next we'll hear from National.
Thank you, John. And yes, the treaty is a very important document, and of course we should respect it. But in the context of the fact that everybody is equal before the law, and there shouldn't be special privileges for any particular race within our country. I agree with the comments that Marcel has just made. We actually are very critical of the current government for undermining what has already been achieved with our treaty settlement process. And David and I, as national MPs, are very proud of what our government did to accelerate the treaty settlement process in a very honourable way. And I've sat through many debates in the Parliament where iwi have been respected and have finally been able to move on from the grievance, receive a settlement which will never be sufficient for what they've lost, but their mana is restored and it does invest in their area. That's the way we should go. As far as the language is concerned, yes, we should do everything we can to encourage teaching of Te Reo. Our party has a policy of trying to ensure that every child has access to a second language. We would anticipate that the vast majority would learn Te Reo, but there may be other languages. The biggest problem, of course, at the moment is the lack of higher teaching.
The Opportunities Party in this round.
I haven't talked today, but the microphone. So, Te Tiriti or Waitangi being very different from the treaty, they are two different documents, so we honour and uphold Te Tiriti or Waitangi. It is not to be settled, it is to be honoured ongoing. We recently had a Māori top party debate which turned into more of a korero because there was so much agreement. We visited I Humapao in our event earlier this year. We have full understanding and, we need to consider the full history of that site. It won't reopen negotiations for all treaty settlements. There's clear legal evidence and documentation around that. In terms of schools, yes, we would support Te Reo being taught in schools. It is a capacity issue at the moment. We are big on professional development of our teachers. Less aero, more teaching, less testing, more learning. We want to see more tikanga, more te ao Māori in our schools as well, so that all children are grounded in their culture and don't have to leave it at the gate when they arrive at school. Yeah.
Well, this next question is your opportunity to throw the lollies at us. It's all about Hamilton. What will your party do to help the development of Hamilton? You might want to reference roading infrastructure, rail infrastructure, economic development. Let's start off with the National Party.
I'll give it to him a little bit at the end. So basically, Jamie says the time has come for Hamilton. Well, that's because of the infrastructure investment that National put in the decade before. The Labour Party has had nothing to do with the Waikato Expressway. They will make up these lies and say that they were part of it. They were not. The National Party have funded that, and we will fund the next stage of that taking it to Tauranga. That is the biggest thing that can happen to Hamilton, is to link with Tauranga, creates the Golden Triangle. The second thing is the med school. We're going to give the university the opportunity to bid for that. Labour took that away from the university, and they did not give that to us. And as Tim said earlier, all we got is a train that hasn't even got off the ground.
And in 15 seconds, the Southern Links project to give us a highway up to the airport and beyond to Waipa and the Taranaki King Country is absolutely essential. It's been on the drawing board for years. We are committed to it. It will be a game changer for particularly the southwest of the city. And the other thing is that the Peacock development was made possible by the funding from the last national government.
Thank you very much. Second off the rank, the Opportunities Party. Yeah, tell us about your plans for Hamilton.
I might have to sit down. Firstly, on Hayden Cargo, you might know my family, Jason and Teresa Cargo, have had a lot to do with this community. I'm a big Hamiltonian, I play cricket. It's a city, I love it. It's the city of the future. Now let's live up to that. Now firstly, this train and any infrastructure needs a return on investment. Me and David are former accountants. This is our deal. Everything should be transparent and not up to allow we scramble up to us to decide. It should be what's best for our country, not who's going to buy votes today. It should be what delivers for everyone. My thing with the train, I'm keen on trains, but it needs to return money. There needs to be enough people using it, and it should be going into our CBD. It should start in India so we can build on density there, build up there so people can travel right from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Third up, New Zealand First.
Goodness, this is where it shows I'm the candidate. I guess what I would say is that New Zealand First has recognised that the regions, many of the smaller regions, have suffered for years and years by lack of investment, which is why we have pushed for the $3 billion Provincial Growth Fund. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that fund. But I'm thinking about towns, I guess as well as Sliggers down the end there. I'm thinking of towns like Moira up north, which were once productive, wonderful little communities with no zero unemployment, with freezing works and dairy companies, and thrived. Under Rogernomics, that all went away. It all disappeared. And those towns had nothing. If you drive through them, it's just, I don't know if you've even been up there, but it's like driving through Soweto. It's like you're in another country. It is just horrendous. So that growth fund, whether it's Hamilton or whether it's Tauranga or wherever, is going to help all of the regions, I believe.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Labour.
Right, thank you. Look, there's a couple of things about to come on board which are incredibly exciting for Hamilton, and I'll just elaborate a little bit on my opening statement. So the passenger rail service early next year will be getting going between Hamilton and Auckland. I could talk a lot about that, but I'll just leave it at that. But also we are developing the business case for a rapid rail system, which will be just over 1 hour between Hamilton CBD and Auckland CBD. When I first got into Parliament 3 years ago, I pulled together all the mayors and their CEs, and I said, what are we going to focus on as a region? And we settled on that corridor, that Hamilton to Auckland corridor. And yes, I acknowledge the previous investment around the expressway. We're adding to that with a rail service, which will enable people to be productive while they're travelling. You'll be sitting next to a table, you'll be able to open your laptop, you'll be able to work all the way up and back. There'll be charging points. And people are certainly really interested in that. Also, $100 million for a mental health facility at the Waikato Hospital, which is certainly much needed, a rebuild of the capability.
Thank you. We'll hear next from the New Conservatives.
Hey. How can we make a difference to Hamilton? Well, New Conservative have several policies that will make a positive impact to the lives of Hamiltonians. I won't be talking about roads, I'll be talking about people, because I think that's where the heart and soul is, and that's where you can make a difference, is when you have a heart for the people. So definitely with regard to solutions, if you check out our policy, our housing policy, our leader has got a construction company and understands why there's a housing crisis at the moment and can see real world solutions to that. Our deputy leader is a social worker from South Auckland, so when it comes to having a heart for people and really making a difference in people's lives, we've got solutions from people with real world experience. So, and the other thing also is our policy with regard to the economy, is fiscal responsibility to actually get the economy going and keep people, the productive sector moving. And
thank you so much. Partners Act?
So I think the other parties have it over us on this one a little bit to a degree because ACT doesn't believe in doing political bribes. Come each election cycle. It is in essence our taxpayers' money. So I will touch on two policies. First off, actually, and with Hayden on this one, we need to see better investment with our taxpayer dollars. That's not used as a political football each cycle. So one of the policies is our infrastructure policy, which would look to put an independent corporation that would make sure that we remove funding away from, the various political parties so that it's better invested and we get a better return on our taxpayer dollars. So that's the first thing. The second thing is our rural agricultural policy. This current government has been openly hostile towards our farmers. Waikato is a predominantly a rural community in terms of, we're going to need our farmers to get back for our recovery. So please go and have a look at our rural policy. It's good.
Thank you so much. Give another round of applause. There's good thinking on your feet. Okay, the next question is all to do with the environment and climate change. Okay, the issue of climate change and its impact upon subsequent generations is an increasing concern for younger generations around the world. What are the primary strategies that your party will follow to reduce the negative impact of climate change on New Zealand? And what's your stance on listening to the science? Alright, this time round we start with ACT.
So ACT believes in a pragmatic approach to tackling climate change. It's important to have policies that are effective rather than just symbolic. The government brought us the Zero Carbon Act, but we've only been pushing emissions overseas. It brought us the ban on oil and gas exploration, but this will only increase the importation of Indonesian coal when contracts expire. And the Greens brought us the Farming for the Future plan, but their anti-genetic engineering stance remains a thing of the past. Too often, regulations mean to preserve the environment, act to stifle innovation and things that could help us. So we repeal the Zero Carbon Act, reverse the ban on oil and gas exploration, and introduce a climate change plan that ties our carbon price to that of our trading partners. We'd also remove regulations that favour landfills over modern waste technology, and we'd update our archaic genetic engineering laws.
Thank you very much. Second, we'll hear from the National Party.
I think it's really important that we do listen to science in this area, and that's an issue that farmers have found with the current government that has brought in freshwater regulations that haven't taken into account science and how people actually farm in geographical areas. And they've had to wind back 4 of those 9 major areas in the last couple of weeks in the context of the failure of those policies. National will work with farmers, we will work with communities to make sure that we get the right policies in place that are scientific and are practical. We look at that on a national scale as well. When we look at things like the ETS, we want to make sure that we are consistent with our trading partners, and we actually, if we're going to bring farming into the ETS, other countries need to do that as well, and they're not doing that, and so that's why we're not bringing it into the ETS. The Zero Carbon Bill, we've promulgated 7 or 8 changes to that that will take into a more wider approach to economics and the carbon pricing as well.
Thank you very much. The third party we'll hear from is the Opportunities Party.
Okay, kia ora. The Opportunities Party is very grounded in science. That is what we base all of our policies on. We have a freshwater policy, a climate change policy, and a biodiversity policy. We want to bring the environment to the centre to provide the direction for National and Labour going forwards. Greens have created a plan about a plan. We're ready to do the action. So a good example is the cap on the cap on the carbon price. At the moment, it's about $25. These guys want to raise it to $35, but actually the evidence shows that big business only moves to energy efficient options when it's about $60. So you've got to remove that cap and let the market dictate the price on carbon. That's a good example. Another example is planting of trees. Less of the pine trees taking up our productive farmland, more of the native trees on erosion-prone land and around our waterways that still sequesters carbon, but it also helps us to create clean water, clean river. So, we're the party of policy, we're the party of science. If you care about the environment, you need to vote top. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Next we'll hear from the New Conservative Party.
On climate change, it all really depends on which side of the fence you are as far as that is concerned. Now, I'm always intrigued because we talk about carbon and it's actually CO2 that we're talking about, which is quite different. If you know water, H2O, you don't have oxygen when you pour out the water out of the bottle. So we need to just understand that we need to follow the science here. And whose science do we follow? That is the issue. So I'm always concerned that we seem to get sidetracked and only follow a specific thought pattern. We really need to have a look at how we spend money. How do we spend our money? We're giving money away to the UN and we're giving money away here and there. It's carbon credits. We're going to plant all these trees. Nobody's ever thought about how much water these trees are going to drink. So let's look at the science. Let's view everything. And those trees are going to be there forever. You can use them to build anything after that. How crazy is that? And we use our farmland for that? How crazy.
Thank you very much. Next we'll hear from the Labour candidates.
So I first want to acknowledge our co-workers, the Green Party, so working with the Labour Party in terms of putting climate change as a focus. Because for a lot of people in my generation, it is important that we do have a clean, green environment moving forward. So just to list a few of the policies that we've worked on. First is the zero carbon bill that we talked about by other candidates. So zero emission by 2050. We've also reinitiated the emission trading scheme. Yes, we have put the offshore oil and gas exploration to a halt, but we are working with businesses in Thailand to transition them into other sectors as well. We've planted, or we've actually said we will plant 1 billion trees. We've done 250 million already, so that's 1 billion by 2028. And also we've created 11,000 jobs in the sector, which are green jobs. So it's about cleaning waterways, protecting the environment, and conservation projects. So 11,000 jobs. And I think especially in this time, we need people to get employed, we need people to get back to jobs, but doing it in a sustainable way is the key.
Last of this round, New Zealand first.
Hi, look, I'm not really sure I'm qualified to state the New Zealand First policy. However, I will say that I heard Winston on TV this morning saying that he does believe in climate change and supports the zero carbon bill. We've also, and I think it was New Zealand First policy, but is the billion trees. And as you said, that's created 11,000 jobs. I think we also have to remember though that our farmers are the cleanest in the world and we produce less carbon per kg of meat than anybody else in the world, and it's farmers that are going to lead us out of this recession. So we have to be very, very careful that in the headlong rush we don't end up crippling our farmers. There are plenty of policies that we can perhaps modify, and perhaps have modified. I believe that was the paying of water. I believe farmers would have been paying for water at this point of New Zealand.
Thank you so much. Now, just to prove that we are actually getting questions off the floor, the next question is a bit of a fun one. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk between the pair of you, the two of you, and then you get to give a one-word answer and then one sentence to follow it up. And here's the question. If your party was an animal, what would it be and why? Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to have a little conflict. The rest of us, we can just take a breath, okay? think you can tell I was a teacher once, huh? Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One word answer, one sentence to follow up. We're just going to start at this end. That's quick fire. Away you go.
Horse.
A horse, why?
Because by freeing up our economy, we can really have it running. There we go.
Thank you. That was one sentence. What would you do?
Oh, in coalition spirit, we were going to be a horse as well.
Also, man.
Because we've got the best horse in the world, Bone Crusher.
Well done. Lady Party. What would you be?
So I think if you look around the world at the moment, a lot of people are looking at us.
One sentence.
A dove.
A dove symbol of peace. A symbol of peace. Thank you very much. New Zealand first.
I think New Zealand first.
One word. What's your animal?
Lion.
Why?
Winston Peters has never been afraid to fight for principles like the Surtex and like the wine box.
Thank you. That's one sentence. And hand over full stop. Next. One word.
Giraffe, because I'm the tallest here.
What would your animal be?
Lion and lioness. Something strong and bold, but obviously family focused.
That's it. That's going to be a full stop at that point. Thank you very much. Right, next question is about education. Let's plumb the depths of this one. What is your party's policy on improving early childhood and primary education, especially for children from disadvantaged and at-risk families and for those with special learning needs? Right? Education policy, but with a tweak on those that are disadvantaged, at risk, or have special learning needs. Let's start with the National Party.
Huge amount there to cover in 1 minute. Early childhood education is the foundation for a child to get started in life, but don't forget that parents are also the most important first teachers. Get the two of them right and a child starting school is likely to be able to start with great advantages. We have announced a policy of putting intensive support around those children who are at greatest risk of falling through the cracks. It harks back to the social investment policy of Seville English, which David and I were very proud to support because it works. There are some families who have huge problems. You have to invest in them, and sometimes you have to keep investing for a considerable period of time. Otherwise, government should get out of people's lives and allow parents to do what they do best and to value the valuable teachers we have at the early childhood and primary system. We must also tackle a whole lot of other things that lead to disadvantage, because you don't have problems in isolation. Where there is addiction, you're quite likely to have abuse, you're quite likely to have dysfunction, absentee parents, and so on. There's a huge amount there. I encourage you to look at our first 1,000 pages.
As potential representatives. So the first question is about the cannabis legalisation and control bill. Now we understand it's not a binding referendum. Will you vote for it, against it, or do you simply just want to pass? We'll start at this end.
For it at the moment.
And just quick fire your way down.
For it.
Against.
Against.
Pass.
Against.
For.
Definitely for
Against, say no to no.
Against.
Thank you very much for your transparency. And in keeping with that method, the second question is about the End of Life Choices Bill. We understand that this referendum is binding. Will you be voting personally for it, against it, or do you wish to pass as we go? Let's start at the far end.
Against.
Against value.
less strongly but for.
For.
Against. First.
Just shout it out.
Definitely for.
Against.
Against.
For.
Strongly for.
for it. And again, thank you very much for your transparency. Give them a hand. We'll start with the Opportunities Party.
You guys will be sick of hearing from me by the end of today. Okay, so when I look to the future for my children, I can look to the future with hope or despair. And because of the Opportunities Party, I have hope. Because our policies are based on research, evidence, what works around the world. Not based on vote buying mentality and not based on the ideology of our leader. So what we need for New Zealand's future is a vision for NAPA. And that's what TOP provides. We are a grassroots revolution. We have more donors than all other parties put together. But we've got low donations, which means that we're not beholden to big money. So we don't want to leave the fundamental changes that are needed in this nation to the whim of career politicians going forward. Okay, we will do what works, and we are encouraging you to vote TOP. Kia ora.
Summary statements. Next, we'll take the New Conservative Party.
Kia ora. I stand here for New Conservative. I can tell you a quick story. I spoke to an MP last year that said to me, if you have a conservative viewpoint, you must be over 40 years old. You're a dying breed. Admit it. You're either dying off or be killed, or if you're not dying off or be killed, you should step aside for a younger generation that has a different philosophy. Now that's the attitude of one MP, but unfortunately he's not the only MP in Parliament with that attitude. And there's also clear evidence from the snickers and remarks from people in the media with regards to the Conservative voice. So please, make a stand and speak for the Conservative voice. I'm standing for New Conservative and...
Thank you very much. The 1 minute pitch, the Labour Party. The 55-second pitch now.
We're doing half week through. We're going to who's going to go first. I'll let Gaurav sort of sum it up. Can I just take just 20 seconds to say I acknowledge that we're in a church and a predominantly Christian audience, and please pray for us as Member of Parliament, as members of Parliament. In Parliament every Wednesday morning we have a prayer meeting there. In terms of myself and Tim and about half a dozen other Christians from around the country attend. So all of you people of faith, please pray for us. Thank you.
Someone saying, strong team, more jobs, better economy, right? So strong team, which has really proven itself, it is a national slogan, the strong team that has really proven itself in the last 3 years, which is in the party-led government. More jobs and more green jobs and better economy because we've responded to a health crisis like no other country in the world. So let's keep moving.
Next, we'll hear from New Zealand First.
Whether you like it or not, we are living under an MEP environment. The likelihood of Labour government alone is remote, and both Labour and National will need partners in order to form a government. You know what? It's actually immaterial to me whether Labour or National govern. So long as New Zealand First is there as the handbrake on the, I was going to say rapid left, and the really hard left and the austere right. New Zealand First has been a handbrake on things like driving our farmers into bankruptcy or taxing the good Kiwis who strive to succeed into oblivion. They also understand that austerity isn't the answer to New Zealand, the answer. Hefty kids and party voters.
from National?
With me here, strong team. You just had to mention Phil Twyford, David Clark, Calvin Davis. Great strong team they've got there. But the reality is that 3 years ago, this Hamilton had the most to lose from a Labor government coming into power. And we lost all the infrastructure investment, we lost the med school, we lost that investment in this city that we need as a city to go forward. If we do not have a national government, we will lose the next level of investment that will take the city forward. There will be no infrastructure link to Tauranga, there will be no med school, there will be no southern links, there will be not those jobs that there should be in this city. And we have a choice of that 100 billion that was going to be borrowed in the next year, where that's spent. And we need to spend that on infrastructure, and we need to spend that in places like Hamilton. We shouldn't be subsidising the rest of the country. This is our chance for Hamilton to get our investment, and the only government that will do that is a national government.
And lastly, we'll hear from Anne.
The world has changed and our country must change with it. Over the last 3 years, but especially throughout this COVID period, ACT has offered constructive criticism where necessary and helpful suggestions where possible. That's the kind of contribution we're going to need going forward so we can get Taiwan smart about public health, so we can achieve elimination without the continued threat of lockdowns, and so we can safely reconnect with the rest of the world. We need to be honest about the debt for those toddlers who are looking at getting their driver's license before the government can post a surplus, and we can capitalise on the opportunity of being an island nation on what may be a pandemic planet, if only we'd stop shooting ourselves in the foot with bad public policy. Only ACT will hold them all to account. A vote for ACT is a vote for a smaller and more efficient and effective government. We value consistency, integrity and accountability. That's what this country deserves, that's why we're standing for ACT, and that's why you should give us your party vote on October 17th.
Thank you very much.
The best time to close down a discussion like this is when everybody wants to keep going, right? But you've got lives to live, you have sleep to have and work tomorrow, and we're going to draw it to a close in a second. God bless you, thank you for being here tonight. The cafe is open, get yourself a coffee, hang out, come and ask these guys your specific questions all the more.
Thank you, Brian.